And now, you're tuned into RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to your RBLR Rays podcast. I am Ben. It's Gasparilla Saturday. With me is Zach. How's it going, Zach?
It is going very well. I feel like I just got a little bit of an education on what Gasparilla is, and I feel like I'm missing out being up here in South Carolina. Like it sounds like a lot going on down there.
Yeah, it's like a watered down Tampa Mardi Gras kind of, I guess, if I had to describe it in a certain kind of way. I feel like we haven't had a Gasparilla where it wasn't either cold or raining or both in like 5 or 6 years. So good luck to everybody that's going out there and you're gonna brave that like 50-degree weather in fishnets and a tank top.
Yeah, I mean, if it's the pirate theme, maybe it kind of works because it's like you're battling the elements as the pirates did in their day. But
yeah, I don't know. Somebody's gonna get scurvy, and that is what it is. So
good for them.
We'll see. But we got some really big news. Like actually, it's not almost surprising. Like it was pretty surprising news with Jeffrey Springs, Pete Fairbanks. What are your initial thoughts on the two extensions we got?
Well, it's like some of it is just shock because like I just did not expect this at all. Like, and I'm beyond ecstatic about the actual extensions, but like the fact that there had been some buzz around the internet that like, we're back to Stu doesn't want to spend and he's trying to shortchange all these guys and then we're extending them. So it's a little whiplash because like with Stu, I never know what he's willing to do. And I got to give him credit. Like these are really good moves. And like, this is investing in the long-term success of the team. And I'm just really, really excited for what this means for the core that we're building, because we're building success, not just for this year, but for years to come.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the core. Well, both Peter Bendix and Eric Neander, when I was listening to the most recent Neil Solon's podcast to kind of, get filled in on these deals a bit more, they talked about the importance of having that continuity in the roster and like guys playing together for years and years and years, and how that's like basically like a building block to get to the postseason. Like that's something they value, like in addition to like pitching and defense as being like, cornerstones of a postseason roster, having guys that have all these years of experiences and multiple experience, under their belt together. It's part of what makes a good postseason roster great. So yeah, I'm just excited that they're willing to invest and just super excited here.
Yeah, and kind of on that note, like all these guys that we're like locking up for long-term deals and that we have now on long-term deals, they've all played in the postseason now. Like everybody's kind of gotten their feet wet. So like you're saying, like we're really building a roster of players that not only have continuity with the team, but also are getting that playoff experience, which I think is going to lead to some really fun runs, I think, coming up very soon.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I was thinking about making a diarrhea joke when you said runs, but we're just going to get into our our listener questions here. So, everybody, you can always tweet at us. We're at RBLR Sports. You can tweet at us individually, all that fun stuff. It's great. But we do have some really great things from listeners today, some awesome engagement. So we appreciate you all. One person here from Funko Noki, I think I'm finally gonna get that right eventually, said, do you think Wander could play his entire career in Tampa, or will he be too expensive to resign / not valuable enough? What do you think?
I want him to play his entire career in Tampa. And I mean, the way that his contract is currently structured, you would think he's going to get another significant payday after his current contract ends, because he's so young. So by the time that he's getting to, the end of that contract, he's going to be the age that a lot of the shortstops in recent free agency have gotten these big deals. It's going to be around that age. So he's definitely going to be up for that big deal. I think some of it's going to depend a little bit on who the owner is of the Rays at that time. If it's still Stu Sternberg, then I don't know. If the ownership changes, it's tough to say. But I think that the fact that, Stu is starting to spend a little bit more gives me hope. But I will say that if he hits free agency, if we don't extend him beyond his current deal before the end of it, I would get nervous because by that time he's going to be probably like a consensus top 5 player in baseball. So the bidding war for his services will be extreme. So I think if he gets to free agency, it's going to be tough to bring him back. It's gonna come down to can Eric Neander, if he's still with the team at that point, can we get an extension before that contract runs out?
Yeah, I think he's going to be expensive no matter what happens. But I guess we're going to have to see if he's worth it. And I think he will be worth it, but it just comes down to what the team looks like 8, 9, 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Which is always really hard to predict, especially with so much turnover all the time and young prospects and all that stuff. So should be fun. This is a question I actually probably should have started with because it's a little bit more relevant to what we talked about at the top of the show, but it's from @RaiseUp39. He said, "Who's next to sign an extension and why should it be Randy?"
It should be Randy. I would love a Randy Rosarena extension. I think he's a little bit older than some of the other young guys that that we could be looking at extensions for. Like guys like Glasnow or McClanahan is the one that I think that people are really wanting an extension for. But I think that Randy brings a lot of, now he's got a lot of postseason experience now. We have seen him perform at a high level in the postseason. And I think that, if you're looking for a reason to extend Randy, I would say that you want someone on your team who you've seen perform at a high level in the postseason, because in my mind, that is kind of where we're at as far as our team goals. Like our goals as a team, I'm not a member of the Rays, but I think the Rays goals as a team are to perform in the postseason. So you want to have those kinds of guys on your team. So it would make sense to extend him.
Yeah, I'm not a huge extend Randy guy just because of the current state of his contract. Like he's under team control through 2026, so his age 31 season. He's in arbitration until then. So it's like he kind of already is on an extension in a way. Like normally when you would extend a guy, you would extend them into their age 30, maybe 31, 32, somewhere in the early 30s would be the end of that extension. And because he was a late arriver or late bloomer in Major League Baseball, whatever, he's kind of already when his current deal expires with the Rays, when he gets out of arbitration, he'll be looking for that big payday that the guys in their early 30s are looking for. So it's kind of I don't necessarily know if he'd want to forego that potential big payday to stick around with the Rays when, corner outfielders are kind of a dime a dozen. They're like the relief pitchers of position players, where it's you can stick a lot of guys out there. So, I mean, if he was playing center field, if he was playing shortstop, some more of a premier position, maybe. But right now, I mean, I'm cool with just riding the wave of arbitration and letting these other guys come up and possibly play in the corner outfield someday.
Yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying there. I also think that there's an element of his agent is Scott Boras, I believe. So I would be surprised if Scott Boras signs for anything less than a really, really significant. If it's an extension, it would have to be pretty significant. It would need to match the market value. There would be no hometown discount with Scott Boras, I don't think. So it might be difficult, like you're saying, to re-sign him. If we're not re-signing Randy to an extension, is there someone else that you think that would be getting an extension soon?
Oh, 100% Isak Paredes. That is, I'm going to keep banging that home. He's the guy that's kind of in that right age bracket where the Rays like to extend for a multi-year deal. I know they just kind of extended some older pitchers, but on the position player side, he's 22, 23, 24, somewhere around there. Established himself at the major leagues last season, finally, after a couple, trial and error seasons with Detroit. Both Bendix, Neander, guys in the front office, they all said that when you talk about players that established themselves in 2022, Paredes was one of the guys. So, I mean, actually, I think he was the guy out of the young cohort of players that they have. He was the one that took that step forward and took that position on the major league roster. So Paredes is the guy I'd like to see extended next for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think he is a big part of what we're trying to do going forward. That like he's one of those guys that is like he's a threat to go deep every time he's up at the plate, and that you can't you can't teach that. Like that's something that I think is really valuable. I would love to see McClanahan get extended, just because like I love the idea of having the rotation all locked up going forward, and it kind of is because he's in arbitration I think until 2020. It's either 2026 or 2027, I think. So he is under team control. So that's but it would be nice to have some peace of mind about it. And I don't, I'm not a fan of these I don't like having to think about arbitration hearings. It feels kind of like I understand that it's a part of the sport and everything, but it always feels a little scummy to me. Like I'm just like we're telling these players who we're going to count on to be like serious parts of our team that we think you deserve a little bit less. Like I just am not a fan. So the less of that we could have, especially with our players that are like the cornerstones of our team, the better going forward.
Yeah, no, definitely. That totally makes sense. And thankfully they did avoid, 2 arbitration hearings in Fairbanks and Springs with these deals. So hopefully we get more on the horizon. But I mean, it seems like extensions could be contagious with, the group, but who knows? I mean, 2 is already like a pretty large amount for for this offseason. But we've got another question here, kind of related to the other side of things. We talked a little bit more about pitching so far, but from at Ben Bath Beyond, I like that one. That's a good one. He said in 2022, the Rays were 17th in batting average, 20th in on-base percentage, 25th in slugging, and 25th in OPS. ESPN came out and ranked us as the number 12 offense heading into the season. So, a little bit, basically middle of the pack, maybe, a tick above. He said, what do you think drove that ranking, which seems a little high considering the lack of free agent bats signed? And he kind of followed it up here with, are a healthy Wander and Bielao that significant? Are there any bigger bumps from anyone that we can expect? And then he does have another question, but we'll get into that after we talk about the projections here from ESPN.
Well, I think he did kind of answer his own question.
Yeah.
I think healthy Wander and Brandon Lau that's a game changer. That's a problem. That could be a combined 10 WAR from those two, like easily from this. Like when you inject those players into your lineup, that is going to improve your offense, 100%. And I think like we were just talking about Paredes, like another full season of him in the big leagues where he's continuing to build on the success he had in the last season. Like that's not not nothing at all, especially if Yandy and Randy keep producing the way they have. Like I think that being ranked number 12, I think is probably fair based on the performance we've had recently. I don't think, I think we'll be ranked higher than that by the end of the year, but I think it's fair to rank the middle of the pack based on the performance. And, we'll have to kind of wait. You have to kind of wait and see what they do. But I think we'll climb as the season goes, but I think it's a fair spot for now.
Yeah, definitely. And I was talking to friend of the show, of course, Darby Robinson on Twitter recently. And he mentioned that like this core of the team, it's basically like the same team from 2021 where the Rays had one of the best offenses in baseball. 2022 was an outlier because surprise, surprise, look at all the injuries they had and on the offensive side, which is, pretty uncommon for this team. Zunino, I know KK has been banged up, but heading into 2022, it was like 4 straight years of playing in at least 80% of the team's games. So like he was consistently on the field and he's a league average hitter, which is, pretty valuable at center field. Brandon Lau, Wander, like we said, went down. So we're not going to see a repeat of the 2022 offense, like unless we get Brandon Lau, Wander Franco, and a couple others go down with injuries, but like that's highly unlikely. Obviously that can happen to any team. So we could say like, oh, any team could get injured, but like the Rays are I'm very confident they're going to bounce back, like just from health alone. So, if we get the health plus like 1 or 2 of the young guys establish themselves, we're looking at a top 10 offense for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, like if you think about it, you subtracted like 70 home runs, 70, 80 home runs, and Austin Meadows gone too. So we lost a lot of offense last year when you combine the injuries and the departures, and you added Paredes, which is a great ad for sure, but like you really didn't inject much into the offense because of the injuries. So like, of course, the offense was going to struggle. And again, we're getting all of that back this year with again, the young guys having another year of experience. Like I predict probably a top, 8 or 9 offense by the end of the season.
Hey, I mean, if we get that with the pitching, which is easily going to be top 5, like that's a playoff team, and that's all you can ask for really every year. So we'll take that. Couple more here before we move into our topic for today. At Bent Connor, we've got a couple questions from him before. He asked, do you still think we add some kind of offense? And this also kind of combines with the follow-up from the Ben Bath Beyond guy earlier, who asked about selling high on Harold Ramirez. So do you think, we add some kind of offense still, and maybe that comes at the expense of a guy at the fringe of the roster like Harold?
I mean, I think it's possible, but like I don't know. I feel like a broken record on this, but it's like, are we really gonna add someone better than Harold Ramirez? Like to like at the level of lineup addition that we're talking about at this point in the offseason. Like, who are we gonna find out there better than Harold Ramirez? Like, I don't know. Like, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head who is available that we could get for like a reasonable price that's like going to be better than that. Like, I don't know if he may regress this year. He's a little bit of a BABIP guy, but I don't think he's going to regress terribly. But I just don't know that I just don't know that the value is there right now. Like, I think there is additions to be made to this team, but I think that that's going to come at the trade deadline and not before the season, because frankly, I don't think there's the availability of the guys that would make a significant improvement to the roster right now.
Yeah, exactly. I think if we go for like an upgrade, like a bigger upgrade, it's going to happen at the trade deadline, if they decide to do that at all. The next like chance that I could see them adding some kind of like lottery ticket bats with like a minor league deal with an invite to spring training is probably when we can start putting guys on the 60-day IL, which I think starts relatively soon. I have to look into that still, but maybe they sell Harold for like a low A prospect or something. I don't really think he has much major league value. This is probably like his peak value right now. Because like you said, I think he will regress to an extent next year. So there's so many options, a lot of ways they can go with this, and it's going to be fun to see everything shake out. But I think the core of this team is intact just because of what we kind of said with the Springs and the Fairbanks extensions. Like, the front office wants to keep the core together. They know that that's a valuable part of the equation of building a World Series team. So we're not really going to see like anybody from the core depart unless it's for a really, really big return, or if it's like, at the beginning or middle part of an off season. But heading into spring training in like 2-3 weeks, like I don't think they're going to do any major shakeups, at least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I just think that, I don't think, because the thing, like the upgrades we'd be wanting to make are someone who's like a top, like I'd want to add someone who's if we're going to move, proven assets on our team, I'm wanting someone who's like a consensus top 70, 80 player in baseball. Like that's the kind of caliber player I'd want. And I don't think anybody at this point in the season is ready to part with those players because they're still having their own aspirations for their team moving into the season. And so I think that's going to come towards the middle of the year.
Yeah, definitely. Like a rental type thing, as opposed to like, selling the farm for a 1 season, 2 seasons of a guy. Like, sell just a couple like higher end prospects for a little bit of a rental. But yeah, who knows? We'll see. Last one I want to get into here is from @Jake Larson. He did ask about the redevelopment plan stuff. And one of the questions that he had, a couple of them, he had a couple questions here. Always a couple. But I don't know enough about like the timeline on when things start to move, like once a plan is selected. So I'm going to not touch on that one. But he did ask, between the Springs and Fairbanks extensions, which do you like more?
I'm going to say that I like the Fairbanks extension more because I think really highly of Pete Fairbanks, and I think that really high quality relievers who are performing at a high level consistently over multiple seasons are rare. I think you have a lot of relievers that have one really good year and then just kind of disappear off the face of the earth. Pete has shown over the past several years that he can perform at a high level consistently, and I think that's really valuable to have on the team. And I think that, you know, if we're, you know, I think the Springs extension is fantastic, but I think we have a little bit more high value depth at the starting pitching position than we do at like the closer reliever spot. Like if you were to subtract Fairbanks from the bullpen, I think that's a more significant loss than if you subtract Springs from the starting rotation. Although both of these significant, I think losing, if we like, this isn't really on the table, but like if we were to subtract Fairbanks, that's more significant than subtracting Springs to me.
Right. No, that makes sense. Like we have that starting pitching depth, and that's a good way to put it. In terms of like value, Fairbanks' deal is extremely like team friendly. I know he's got his 2 Tommy John surgeries. He's got shoulder problems. He had the lat tear. Like he's got a lot of baggage with him. So I understand like the lower dollar value there with, you know, some decent incentives that can make that contract worth up to $24 million. So he's got 12 million guaranteed. He can double the value of his deal if he hits everything. But yeah, I love the deal from a team friendly standpoint. From a personal agenda standpoint, the Springs deal is my favorite. Like it's a 31 million guaranteed, up to 66 million if he hits all his incentives with innings pitched, Cy Young voting. Like that's like a big time deal. It's massive. He's a guy that he was drafted in the 30th round in like 2015 or something like that. His signing bonus was $1,000. DFA'd twice, tore his ACL, like, and he's still like continuously improving. Like I was looking at his pitch shapes and stuff, and like the way he's tweaking his slider to have like a cut slider in addition to like more of a standard, like, you know, regular, I don't want to say sweeping slider, but, you know, a basic slider, you know, playing with the sinker. He's just a guy that's like, he's a lifelong learner. I love the mentality and just his willingness to grow and change, even though he's, you know, already almost a finished product. Like it's so cool. And I know we can't say it definitively yet, but like the Rays won that trade with Boston. Like it feels pretty strong. I feel pretty strongly about that. I know we can definitively say at this point the Rays won the Fairbanks trade. The Rangers traded away Solak for cash considerations to the Reds. Like, so these are 2 excellent moves by the Rays front office and scouting development teams. Like they've really gotten a lot out of these guys, and it's awesome to see them get rewarded.
Which, can we just take a moment to just put to bed these like comments that we see of like the Rays ruin pitchers and then they sap them of all their value and throw them in the trash? Like, come on, like how many pitchers have the Rays brought in who have struggled with injuries and have their careers are like on the verge of being over? They bring them in, revamp their arsenal, and then they either give them an extension or someone else gives them a big contract. This narrative out, and this is a narrative that I have heard from like not just like people on Twitter. I've heard this from like other big, you know, baseball personalities and even mainstream media that the Rays are like ruining their pitchers and then disposing of them when they get no more value out of them. I just cannot with that narrative, because you just see these guys like Fairbanks, 2-time Tommy John, you know, Springs, ACL, like all these, they bring these guys in who actually have had concerns that wouldn't be getting these deals otherwise, bring them in, improve their careers, and then they're giving them extensions or they're making life-changing money now. Like, I just think that narrative needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can almost understand what they mean, but like the exception is not like the rule. Like there are a couple guys where like they do end up playing for the Rays and they get hurt, whatever. But like so many more players than not are being kept around, and they're being like you know, rehabilitated within the team. Like what's his name? Ryan Burr. They signed like an injured pitcher that the White Sox threw to the side. He's going to be in spring training. They signed him like last year in like, I want to say like August. And their plan was to, you know, help him get through his injury and bring him back for spring training. Andrew Kittredge is still on the team. He's had a couple Tommy John concern type things. They really tried with Nick Anderson. Brendan McKay was brought back. There are just so many, even like what Jeffrey Springs said when he like signed, like part of the reason why was like how the Rays like treated him and his family, like middle of the season when his son was sick. Jeffrey Springs had a freak ACL accident too. Like they could have just tossed him to the side because like whatever, but no, it's a false narrative, and I'm not going to buy into that. So the Rays are doing the right thing, like people wise and player development wise.
Amen.
So we'll get off our soapboxes here and move into our topic. But thank you all for sending these in. Be sure to like, subscribe before you send in those topics, so we don't ignore you. But just kidding, we'll probably not ignore you. These were all great. You can always send us questions, comments, concerns, thoughts. We'll talk about literally anything. Follow us at RBLR Sports. Share us on your social media when we read your questions. And it's kind of like when you're on TV and you're like, hey, Mom, I'm on TV. Like, turn to this channel, like whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, share this podcast because, we read your questions. And for any of them that we missed, they were either not good questions. No, I'm just kidding. They're either like not super relevant to what we're going to talk about, or they're extremely relevant. So we're saving them to kind of dive in as we get into our topic here. So I think that just about covers that little plug. So we are ready to get into this topic here.
Yeah, so the thing we were wanting to discuss kind of as we're getting through the arbitration and we're getting towards the beginning of the regular season is we have kind of a roster crunch that we're looking at we have some players that have a lot of them have seen major league time or being talked about seeing major league time this season, and there's kind of a lot of them, and so we just thought we'd take some time to discuss a couple of these players that what do we expect from them? Are they going to get major league time? Are they going to be moved on from? Are they going to be stuck in AAA? And there are going to be a lot of names that you guys know. Is there anyone you wanted to start with, Ben?
I kind of wanted to start with talking about like the locks on the roster, like who is pretty much safe, like within like reasonable, I guess reason. I don't know what I was going to try to say there. But the arms that I see that are safe are obviously Jason Adam, Jalen Beeks is pretty safe. Clevenger, Eflin, Fairbanks, Glasnow, what's his name? McClanahan, Rasmussen, Springs, the Kevin Kelly, the Rule 5 selection, because like he has to stay on the roster. So those are 10 arms out of 13 that are pretty much safe. In terms of the bats, Bethancourt and Mejia, they're good. Wander, obviously, Yandy, Paredes, Brandon Lau. Aranda, I think, is pretty safe with the departure of Ji-Man Choi. Randy, Jose Siri, Manuel Margot. And again, those are 10 bats that are safe of the 13 because we get a 26-man roster. Was there anyone you disagreed with in those guys who were safe so far?
Not really. I think Aranda, some people may balk at us saying Aranda is safe, but I think you made the great point of with Ji-Man Choi leaving, there's kind of some open at bats available at first base. And I think Aranda showed that he could handle that. And I think that, I think his bat warrants him getting a real shot in the major leagues and getting a chance to prove that he can hold it down out there. I would agree.
I mean, I'm not saying he's going to play every day, but like there's no other like left-handed first base on the roster, like left-handed first baseman. So he's, I can reasonably say that like he's a safe guy. In terms of arms that are probably safe, these are guys that I might have hesitated for a second thinking about. Colin Poche and Sean Armstrong are two guys that I was like, yeah, they're safe, right? Like, I mean, I don't think Armstrong has options. I know Poche has options, so he could possibly start in Durham. Armstrong, I mean, the Rays have let him go before, so it kind of makes me hesitate. But yeah, how do you feel about those two guys?
I feel like Poche is the more valuable and more likely to stick with the team than Armstrong. I also think that Armstrong's ability to pitch multiple innings kind of makes him like, I think that especially with how well he kind of started to pitch towards the end of the year, I think if the Rays ever did send him down or like release him to try to see if maybe he'll clear waivers, we can get him back. I think the chances that he clears waivers again are not high because I think he's kind of showed some value now to teams, and I think somebody would take a flyer on him. I think he's shown some value. He's shown enough value that I think if we see him leave the roster, he's probably not coming back.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. In terms of bats that are kind of in that same category where they're probably safe, maybe they, start in AAA, maybe they get moved elsewhere. I'm thinking Taylor Walls. I know he's like the only other shortstop on their roster, but like somebody else could possibly step in, like Vidal Brujan. And Walls does have options, so I think he's probably safe. I think he does make the roster, but I did hesitate when thinking about him. And then also Harold Ramirez, just because I think he's not part of the core because he's only been here for a year and he's coming off the best season of his life. So he seems like the perfect sell high candidate for like a non 40-man prospect. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Walls and Harold?
I'm pretty high on Walls. I think he's a valuable member of the team. Like you said, we don't really have another shortstop unless you count Brujan on the team right now. And I think that, his defensive value is really high. I think we're a team that I think will have the option to I think if we, based on how well our, how well the offense plays and how well our pitching is going to play, I think that there's going to be a lot of games where it would be beneficial to have a late game defensive substitution available like him and who also can swing the bat and not be a completely useless person, at the plate. I think he has a lot of value there. I mean, I'm kind of partial to Harold Ramirez. I would like to see him on the team, and I think he has some value, but I also understand that he's probably going to regress and he's probably a candidate to be moved or to not start on the roster. I would like to see him because he was a really important contributor to the team at a time when we really needed it. So, I mean, I'm sort of partial to him, but I can also be, being realistic. He's not as safe as, these other players we've talked about.
Right, absolutely. So I wanted to start with those guys in particular because that's, those are 12 arms and 12 bats that are probably on the roster. The first 10 of each category mentioned, those are like pretty much locks. So that kind of leaves it to a couple different arms and a couple different bats that we can talk about here that are, possibly, a toss up maybe on the outside looking in. I know we can get into some non-roster invites maybe later on, but these are kind of like the immediate guys with major league experience that are, almost part of the core, but kind of not, but could establish themselves. So with the arms, we've got Ryan Thompson, frequently injured, but he has been around for quite a bit. I believe he has options, so that kind of makes it a little bit more tricky. Luis Patino, Yanni Chirinos, and Josh Fleming. So those are four guys kind of competing for that final, bullpen or bulk roster spot in terms of pitching. So what are your thoughts on those guys? Is there anyone that you think would end up on the roster out of the four? Because I mean, what we've talked about, there's basically like one, maybe two roster spots left, depending on injury.
Yeah, and my favorite player out of that bunch, and the answer to this question, I don't think are the same person, unfortunately. I think that Yanni Chirinos is the guy for me that I would like to see on the major league roster to start the year. I think he's super underrated, and I think he has a ton of value out of the bullpen for the Rays. He does, and he can make spot starts when needed. I think the person that I want to be playing well enough to be on the roster is Patino, because I think he has the most potential if he can ever figure it out. But it's hard to remove the last time I remember seeing him pitch where he just looked like a lost kid up there on the mound, giving up like 8 runs. Like it was not a good look at all. Like, and I think he needs some time, and I don't think he's ready yet. I think he needs some time in AAA, but I want him to be playing well enough to deserve a spot on the roster. Because I think if he's playing well enough to be on the big league roster, then that's a good thing, because I think he has a lot of potential.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of feel the same way. Like, I think it'll be Yanni. I believe he's out of options too, so that kind of makes it a little bit easier maybe for the team to decide. I know that Ryan Thompson has options. Patino, I think he has like one more option year, I'm pretty sure. And he's still kind of cooking down there in the minors. I think the Padres kind of rushed his development a bit, so the Rays are pumping the brakes there. Fleming still has options, and he's kind of going to be a stick around, like innings eater type guy. I could see him improving, but I think Yanni does kind of get that last roster spot because, like you said, he can spot start. He can pitch in relief. His stuff will play up in a shorter outing, but yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on his health and where he's at. He looked really good when he came back up. So yeah, I feel pretty good about Yanni kind of getting that final spot. But again, injuries, trades, something could happen. But I think the pitching I feel pretty good about a pitching staff that consists of Yanni, Sean Armstrong, Colin Poche, Springs, Rasmussen, McClanahan, Kelly, Glasnow, Fairbanks, Eflin, Clevenger, Beeks, Adam. Like those are 13 above average pitchers, and you're not, shooting yourself in the foot putting any of those guys out there in the right situations, obviously.
Yep, I agree. Shout out to Flum Dog, though. I do think he will make appearances this year, and I really do like him as a player. I think he is the most unlucky pitcher on the roster. I feel like he just gets and I don't know if it's because he's kind of a ground ball pitcher and he relies on the defense sometimes, but like I remember there's been some outings where I'm like, can somebody please just help this man, because he's giving us good outcome. He gives us good outcomes a lot of the time. When he's pitching, the outcomes from the at-bats that he's pitching in are generally good. And it's just sometimes he just gets the worst luck. So I shout out to Flum Dog. I hope to see him up at some point this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I meant to look into it, but I wanted to see the rate at which the Rays infield defense made errors when he was pitching compared to other pitchers. Because it felt like a lot more. And I know the Rays defense did take a step back. So when you're trying to field a 12-mile-an-hour ground ball that only went like 15 feet, it's harder than fielding like an 80-mile-an-hour grounder that's kind of like hit right at you. So I mean, he's getting the right results with the batted ball stuff, but yeah, maybe that's for another episode, I guess.
Perhaps.
Yeah. In terms of bats, though, I think this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Oh, I also meant to mention with the arms, Calvin Fauché, I think he's on like the outside looking in. He's got some cool stuff, but he's kind of in that same like Fleming, Thompson, Patino kind of group. Yeah. Where if there's an injury, like he'll be one of the first guys up, but I don't see him, making the active roster out of spring training.
Yeah, I think, just call me when he can hit the strike zone more than 3 pitches in a row. Then we'll talk. Then we'll talk.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of talking, you're going to be calling people for Valentine's Day. You're calling them on the phone. You're saying, "Oh my gosh, hey, I love you so much. Check your mail. I sent you a shirt from shop.rblrsports.com to show you my love and my gratitude." Valentine's Day is coming up. Like I said, you want to start buying clothes for your loved ones. Maybe you want to buy them a shirt so you can take off the shirt, something like that. So you can head on over to shop.rblrsports.com. If you want to get 10% off your shirt, you can use promo code FLAPPY. That's FLAPPY. If you don't want to be cheap and you want to, be a tough guy, spend that money like you mean it, don't use the promo code. Either way, you should just buy something. Great Valentine's Day gift. My birthday is coming up, so don't buy me a shirt. Just buy a shirt for yourself for my birthday to celebrate. That would be great. Use your tax return money. That's going to be coming up soon. Make sure you get that stuff taken care of. Get your W-2s. I think that's all I could really muster for that ad read.
That was plenty, I believe.
Okay, yeah, I think it was a little too much.
No, I think it was just right. It was good.
I hope so. But anyways, like we said, we talked about the 12 bats we kind of already have with Walls, Harold. Those guys may be a little shaky. I think Walls is safer. But then Margot, Siri, Randy, Aranda, Bilao, Paredes, Yandy, Wander, Mejia, Bethancourt. Those are 12 bats. And then we've got about like 4 that are kind of, quadruple A, like on the fringes here with Rene Pinto. I think he's the third catcher. I think he's probably going to start in Durham. But then we've got Vidal Brujan, who is out of options, Josh Lowe, and then Luke Raley. Luke Raley is also out of options, I believe. But those are 4 guys competing for one roster spot, aside from Pinto, who I think is probably just not going to compete much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Pinto really has a role on the team right now with Mejia and Bethencourt both being healthy and performing in the way that they are. But yeah, Vito Brujan is that's a tough case right now because like I mean, I think that just based on the fact that he doesn't have any more options, he may start out in AAA because we don't want to burn that option if we decide we want to make a move.
Yeah.
So he'll probably start out in AAA. It's also the reason why I think he was kind of playing well towards the end of the year last year, and he didn't come up at all. And I think that's part of the reason is they didn't want to burn an option. And so I think he's an interesting case. I think he is, to me. I think he's a very likely candidate to be a part of a package deal in a trade sometime in the future because I think he does have a lot of value. I just don't think he really fits in with where the Rays are going right now. But I think he's got a lot of value to somebody out there. And again, I think there's a world in which we're packaging Brujan, somebody else, and a reliever like a Poche or somebody else who's performing well around the trade deadline for a bat. Like I think that's a trade I could see with some value that could, to a contender that needs some youth and a bullpen arm. Like I think there's a real trade to happen there. But I think that Josh Lowe is probably the one to start on the major league roster to start the season. Just because I think he, part of me, it's tough because you kind of want him to continue to develop. So do you send him to AAA to get him consistent starts, or do you, bring him to the majors to get, at bats at that level? I think, at some point with him, like I really want to know what we've got with him, because I think there's been a lot of talk about what he could be. I'm ready to kind of see it. So I think I'd like to see him up to start the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see him making the roster out of spring training and then kind of like platooning with Margot. And if you remember from last year, he was kind of like the guy of the young group that made the roster out of spring training. I know the Meadows trade opened up that path, but the front office was, high enough on him to say like, okay, you're going to be on the opening day roster. So I wouldn't put it past them to, put him on there again, but there's still the option with Brujan and his versatility. Luke Raley is, of the three, he can play first base, which is like a spot they might, I don't want to say they need to fill that, but they might want to fill that if maybe Aranda isn't looking good. I don't know. It's interesting though, because like when camp breaks and the opening day roster is set, some of these guys might not be in the organization anymore. So this is definitely like a roster spot battle to pay attention for in the next coming weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a chance that either Luke Raley or Brujan are not a part of the team. When the season starts, I think there's a very real possibility, and I think that would be, I think it would be sad if it would be, I would be sad to see Brujan go, even though I've kind of been saying that I think he's the odd man out because he's definitely been a talented player that's been fun to watch. He's done some really great things at AAA, but I just it's unfortunate that he's out of options and that we're kind of in this, we're kind of in a spot where we have to make a decision on him. And unfortunately, he just hasn't played well enough yet at the major league level to me to justify the roster spot yet. And again, if he comes up and plays really well, that's great. I would love to see that because if you look at just the raw athleticism, that's a player I want on my team. But we just haven't seen it yet at the major league level, and so I think there's a better than 50% chance. I think there's a better than 70% chance he's not with the Rays at the end of the season. It's probably a better than 30 or 40% chance he's not with the Rays at all to start the year.
Yeah, definitely. It sucks for him, but I mean, what else are we going to do at this point? But I mean, this is kind of like a silver lining here, but it's also not great because, you never want guys to get injured, but the 60-day IL will make this kind of roster crunch a little bit less harsh for some guys. Like it'll give others another chance if they, weren't sure they were going to make the roster, because Shane Baz, Andrew Kittredge, they're, they're certainly going to be on the 60-day IL to start the season. Not 100% sure what they're doing with Colby White, so we'll have to wait on that. But those are, unless I'm missing anybody else, those are 2, maybe 3 roster spots that are going to be open for some of these fringe guys that are, maybe on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody else that's in this. I think because the Fire Rising's on the Dodgers now, so that
Yeah.
was the other guy. But yeah, I haven't heard anything recently on where Colby White is. So I don't. Well, that's maybe something we'll hope to see some news on as the season gets closer, because I haven't heard too much of an update on him recently. So
Yeah, last time I heard was on a Solon's podcast. He was starting to throw like late January.
mhm.
So I mean, I don't think he'll be ready to start the season, but I don't think it's a 60. I mean, it could be a 60-day IL situation, but it might just be like a 10-day
Yeah,
IL situation. But he's actually on there for like 30 days, like a month. So
right.
we'll see. But basically, these 60-day IL spots kind of add a little bit more competition to the roster in spring training. The Rays have signed Heath Hembry, Ben Heller, Elvin Rodriguez, Trevor Kelly, Zach Birdie, I believe, and then Jamie Schultz brought him back, former Ray. He's
Mhm.
coming off Tommy John surgery. They signed these guys with an invite to spring training. So these are guys that are also competing to make the major league roster. Most of them will not. Most of them will end up being nothing. Some will go to AAA and then get released immediately because of whatever like clause in their contract, where if they don't make the team, then they go back into free agency. So a lot of stuff happening there. And then there's also some minor league invites to spring training that do have a chance to break camp. So that's kind of exciting, like guys that are internal within the organization.
Mhm.
But first, I want to talk about those free agents they signed with invites. Is there anybody of that group that I mentioned? I mean, they're all pitchers, but
Yeah.
anybody that you think could possibly break camp with the team if there's like an injury or some kind of spot available?
Um, Heath Hembry is a veteran,
Mm-hmm.
so I think if anybody, like, I think that he's a guy that maybe has the experience to warrant, being a part of the roster if we break camp and, like, I don't know, Poche gets hurt, or just as a
Mm-hmm.
random name out there, or Armstrong or whatever. Like, I think that's a possibility, just because, like, I don't think that I think at this point in I think we have enough projects as far as like young guys that we have that are available. So I think if somebody from that group is going to make the roster, it's going to be someone with some experience behind him. I think Heath Hembry's a good candidate for that.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking the same thing with Hembry. I don't have like all of his numbers in front of me, but I know he was pitching in high leverage at one point in his career.
Mhm.
Jamie Schultz is kind of interesting. He actually has the ninth highest whiff rate in team history since 2008 among guys with at least 250 swings. So he was good. I know he's coming off Tommy John surgery, so we'll have to see where he's at. But he's got some swing and miss potential, which I know is extremely valuable in a bullpen piece. I don't think he'd be pitching in high leverage right away, just because he's literally like he would be the last guy on the roster. But there's him. There's Trevor Kelly, who's got that really interesting arm slot.
Mhm.
Lots of tools, and some of these guys they could stick in AAA and be like pitching depth, like we saw with like Luke Bard or Ralph Garza, like
Mhm.
guys that are come up when needed. So the depth is there. You can never have too much pitching, so those moves are good. You get these lottery ticket type players, like even Zach Birdie, who can touch triple digits. Like you never know what you can get out of these guys at the right system. So yeah, that basically covers all the free agent non-roster invites, unless there's anybody that I'm missing that you noticed.
I can't. I don't have any. I don't. I can't remember anybody else that is of major notice.
Okay, cool. Then we'll move on to talking about some of the guys internally who might have a shot at cracking the opening day roster. I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm doubtful. Like most of these guys could do it, but injuries and stuff like that could really change things. So obviously the big one, we've got Curtis Mead. He's probably the most major league ready of the bunch that's invited to spring training. There kind of is an available spot for him on the roster, like a corner infield type spot. I know we mentioned Aranda, like is probably safe just because he has kind of that experience and his bat will play at the major league level. But Mead is not far off. Um, I don't know. What do you think about Mead breaking camp
I would
with the
really
team?
like to see it. I think that would be
Yeah.
really fun if he's on the opening day roster. I do think that I think the person whose spot might be in danger is Harold Ramirez. Like, I think they may
Hmm.
be watching, like, I think between Aranda and Ramirez, I think the coaches are going to be watching those, like, Mead, Ramirez, and Aranda. I think there's like 2 spots available for 3 guys, in my opinion. I think that the Rays would like Mead to be playing well enough to justify a roster spot to start the season. So I think they're going to be watching those 3, and I think that whichever of those 3 is playing the best has a really good chance of making the roster on opening day.
Definitely. I mean, there's also the service time aspect of it with Mead, where like if you keep him down until like June, July, then you do get him for like an extra year of arbitration. So that is something that I think could happen. I wouldn't be super mad about it because I kind of want Mead to be around for a long time. I think he's going to be a very good player, but I also want to see him play. But then there's the other side where it's like if he's at the majors, he's going to be platooning and not playing every day, which isn't great for his development. So it's like I would kind of rather have Harold playing like the short side of that first base platoon with Aranda because like I don't care if Harold stops developing. Like I'd rather have Mead continue to develop by playing every day in Durham. So personally, I would go with like Aranda and Harold as that first base platoon. Aranda with the long side there because he's a lefty. But I think Mead will play well enough though to justify a call up. Probably sometime conveniently after like the service time limit.
Oh man, it's June, and man, Harold
Oh,
had a cold streak for like 1 game. I guess it's time. Yeah, it was the right. It was God's plan. I think that I get it, like the way that service time is. It's the game, it's the way it's played. It's very distasteful to me that the way, and I understand that everybody does it. It's just baseball. I'm not a big. It's just annoying to me to like see that we're like the idea that if we needed a major league ready player available, there would be even a thought to be like, well, if we waited another week, we can it's just kind of annoying, but I get it. I do think that there's a real chance that, like you're saying, they keep him in AAA to let him develop and continue to improve every day. And then you kind of have him sitting there being like, as soon as there's an opportunity, like you're kind of with the idea that like, hey kid, keep playing, keep improving. And the second we get a chance, you're up. I think that's a real, because I think that's also a good headspace for him to be in, to be like, hey, let me just keep grinding, let me keep improving. And you like, as soon as there's a chance, I'm coming up. And it's going to be this, like, we will see Curtis Mead in the major leagues this year. I am like 99% sure that he will be up, barring an injury to himself. I think that he will be up in this year at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. This next thing I want to kind of talk about is related to a question that we got, but I wanted to save it for now because it wasn't super relevant until right now. Tristan Gray is a left-handed infielder, mostly corner infielder, played in Durham. He had a home run per plate appearance rate in the 98.9 percentile of all minor league hitters. He's a lefty with some pop. Came over in the Corey Dickerson trade a while ago, found his power swing last year in Durham. I know that, juiced ball speculation things might have inflated his numbers, but what do you think about the possibility of Tristan Gray becoming that left-handed corner infielder that, a lot of fans were wanting?
I think it could be very fun because he's very popular in Durham. He hits bombs and he hits them consistently. And I think that, that would be a very fun solution to this problem that we're having. And I think that again, like, I don't think Harold's or Aranda's spot is safe. So if Tristan Gray comes to camp and hits bombs, like they could be like, all right, kid, let's see what you got. Like, I think that that could definitely be, because he's one of those players where, again, we're in that like quad A thing. And to me, at some point, you gotta give them a chance. Like, they're playing well enough. It's like, well, let's see what you got. Let's see what you have. Can you play at the big leagues? Can you hit dingers off of the same, off of these guys that are doing it for a living, as opposed to the guys who are, just trying to break in and are working at Publix on their off days? Like, can we, what are we, can you do it at that level? And I think it would be really fun to see it. I don't think it's incredibly likely that he's, that he's going to do that, but I would love to watch it. It would be a very fun storyline.
Yeah, definitely. I like that you use the word fun to describe it because that's how I would describe it too. I think he's definitely behind Aranda in terms of like left-handed corner infield bats.
Mhm.
Actually, I'm very confident he's behind Aranda, but it would be kind of fun. The depth is there if an injury does happen. I know it might not be quality depth, but it might be fun depth. So there's that. We've also got Grant Witherspoon, another non-roster invite from AAA. Played in the Australian League a little while ago. He's pretty good. Plus defender in all three outfield spots. 84th percentile extra base hit per plate appearance rate. Again, Josh Lowe, he's ahead of Witherspoon for sure. But there's the possibility, like, players get injured. Everybody's going to get hurt at some point. Like, it's inevitable that, a spot's going to open up. So there's that. Couple more corner outfield guys I want to talk about. Nico Holsizer, really big guy, 70 grade power. He's a right-handed bat though, but he does have extra base hit rates and home run per plate appearance rates in the 96th percentile with both of those. Like tons of power. Ruben Cardenas, I think I'm saying that right. He had a really good spring training last year in some, I think it was like 12 at bats he got, but he looked really good. Right-handed guy again, corner outfielder, career 130 WRC plus in the minors, over 1,000 plate appearances, but he had a 105 and 22. Kind of hurt him. He was still somehow in the 96th percentile in home runs per plate appearance. So like, there's a lot of potential. I don't think these guys are going to make the roster, but it could be fun. What do you think about those three?
Yeah, and I think that there is the scenario that I think if it's not an injury, there is a scenario where they're like, we think Josh Lowe needs to cook a little bit more at AAA because we think he has I think that even though all those guys have that potential with the power, I think that they probably see Josh Lowe as the most complete player and the guy they see the most likely to be a long-term, major leaguer, at least right now. Based on the way they've been talking about him. So I see a universe where they're like, well, let's let Josh Lowe cook a little longer in AAA and give one of these guys a shot and see if any of them can catch fire, on the major league level. And see, you never know. And I think that there's a world in which one of those guys gets a shot at the major league level because they want to give Lowe some consistent at bats in AAA, and then call him up later.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a real possibility, and it's interesting because we kind of have a strong feeling about what will happen, but with the way baseball goes, like a lot of different things could happen here. So that's on the offensive side. Just want to touch on the pitching side of these non-roster invites real quick, because I mean, the pitching is pretty much set, but injuries happen to pitchers a lot more than position players. So there's a chance we could see some of these guys at some point in the season. But we've got Braden Bristow, former Yankee minor leaguer. The Rays signed him recently. He's got an extremely high spin rate on his curveball, like over 3,000 RPM, low 90s fastball. Not great. He's a righty. I don't really see him sticking around on the major league roster. Maybe, has some fun in AAA. Then there's Chris Muller. He's been in the Rays system for a little while. He's got a big mid-90s fastball, pretty hard slider and a splitter too, which is cool. Injuries hurt him a little bit, but he was in the 79th percentile in strikeout rate in the minors since 2021. And then Trevor Brigden, another Rays minor league relief pitcher. He actually had the second best Weezer score, like that stat that I made up, in the Rays minor leaguers among relievers, just behind Joe La Sorsa, who I want to talk about in a little bit. Mid 90s rising fastball, 98th percentile strikeout to walk rate since 2021. And then Hector Perez, who was a minor league Rule 5 pick, literally like in December, like whenever that happened in the minor league Rule 5 draft. He's a career minor league journeyman. He does have some MLB experience in 2020. He was a former highly rated prospect. So, I mean, he's another guy who could possibly make a case for himself to break camp with the team out of spring training. But anything interesting of those three guys or anybody else I missed there in the pitching side?
Are we including Taj Bradley in that? Did he get invited to camp?
I think he did. I actually might have missed Taj Bradley.
Because I think that's the only one that comes to my mind.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll look that up. I'm
gonna pull that up.
so we can pull it up. But I mean, we can maybe because Taj Bradley, I think that might be its own like little site, like not separate from this, but it's a little bit of a separate conversation because there's some stuff to talk about there. But of the guys you just mentioned, the bullpen's so solid right now. I don't really see any of those guys making the opening day roster because I think they have a lot of fun stuff, but that's kind of stuff that I think that they would like to tinker with and see, what they could do with that at the AAA level. I don't think that's, I don't think that any of those guys are really going to, challenge any of the more solid, bullpen guys for a roster spot, at least for as far, my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so real quick, Taj Bradley, like he's on the 40-man, so like he's going to be in spring training.
Right.
I don't really see him breaking camp with the team though, because he really needs some work in AAA. Like he was getting slapped around quite a bit. Mead is a different story because he went up to AAA and he just kept doing his thing. So I think like Mead is probably, closer to the majors. And there's also like we said like earlier at the top of the show, the starting pitching depth is really strong right now. Yeah. So Bradley would take a couple injuries and maybe a move or two to get him on the major league roster. But again, he's someone that we will see in spring training, so that's pretty cool. I'm excited to see him.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see him. It was weird because we were kind of like the hype train for Taj Bradley was kind of rolling full steam around middle of last year, and then he just kind of got knocked around a little bit towards the end of the season, and it was a little rough to watch. And I think that he just I don't think that he is like I don't think he. I think he's still going to improve, but I think that there's, I think Patino's ahead of him. I think Chirinos is ahead of him. I think Flumdog's ahead of him. Like. I just it's there like we would have to like have somebody would have to like throw a bat in the dugout and knock out like 3 pitchers to result in him being brought up. So I think he needs some time to cook.
Yeah, definitely. I did kind of want to bring up a couple like AA guys that are really far away from the roster, but honestly, if they're making the major league roster out of spring training, like there's a pretty serious issue. So I don't want to touch on them too much, but it is cool that La Sorsa, Anthony Molina, and Austin Shenton all got invited to spring training. So, good for them. Maybe they'll, make a case for themselves to get moved up to AAA right out of the gate. So that would be cool. But yeah, I mean, I think that kind of covers the inevitable roster crunch stuff that's going to happen throughout spring training. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we start to wrap this up?
Did Manzardo get invited to spring training?
He did, yes.
I can't remember. I think he's in the same. I agree. I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but I think he's definitely in that same boat if he needs some more time. And he's got some buzz because he's been performing so well. And I think there was a tweet of like where he's in like the 90th percentile of like every statistic of like of hitting. Like he's super fun. I'm excited to see him play this year, but he's not ready for the majors yet. But like he is like. When we have this conversation again next year, I think he's going to be one of the guys that we're talking about maybe breaking camp next year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He could possibly get up to the majors this year, like later, maybe like a September call-up type thing. But yeah, I don't think he's going to be like a major contributor this season. He might get a cup of coffee at the end of the year, but nothing significant unless something goes like horribly wrong or incredibly right. Like it's going to be on one end of that spectrum for better or worse. So
yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that the fact that the first base spot is kind of open has kind of fueled some discussion of like, could he make it? And again, like I don't see the first base spot necessarily being 100% filled anytime soon. So if he just like comes up with his hair on fire for the first couple months of the season, I mean, you never know. But that would be, I mean, again, that would be super fun. But I expect him to get a cup of coffee at the end of the year and then maybe break camp at the beginning of next year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's going to be a fun spring training. It's coming up in a couple weeks. Pitchers and catchers report, I think like mid-February. So that's coming up really soon. Arbitration stuff. I know they signed, the Fairbanks and Springs extensions, but we still have 5 arbitration hearings, maybe more extensions on the way. Fan Fest is coming up February 18th. So another cool thing. If you're in the area and able to go. Valley Sports is going bankrupt. That's another fun thing. 25th anniversary coming up. They unveiled their logo. Just it's a good time to be a Rays fan right now. Lots of things happening.
It is a good time to be a Rays fan right now, especially if we never have to see the Bally Sports bug again. That would be excellent. I would really like to move on from that period of Rays history if we could.
Yeah, absolutely. One more thing. I know I keep saying like one more thing. Australian Baseball League playoffs are happening right now. Through the first 2 games, the Perth Heat, the team Junior Caminero plays for, they're 1-1, so they've got a game tomorrow to decide the series for who goes on to like the final or whatever. First 2 games, he is 3 for 10 with a double and a couple RBIs, so he keeps hitting the ball, even against like the good teams in Australia. Like he's not just beating up on whatever team he's playing. Yeah. Like everybody's getting the business from King Caminero over there and down under.
Yep, walk-off home run incoming for I guess this morning. I don't know when they're playing our time zone.
Yeah,
but
it's going to happen in the next 17, 18 hours. So I'm looking forward to it.
Very fun.
Last thing I'm looking forward to though is everybody liking, subscribing, sharing, following, commenting, rating, subscribing. If I said that one already, purchasing, donating. We're at RBLR Sports on all social media. Give us 5-star reviews. Give us money. Give us your support. And give the Rays your support too as we head into spring training. So thank you all for listening, and go Rays.
Rays up.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.